Sometimes, a single phone call is the last breadcrumb someone leaves behind. One final voice, one desperate message, one moment before vanishing forever. Tonight, we dive into 5 terrifying cases, 5 people who made one phone call and were never seen again. If you believe these stories deserve answers, subscribe to Dark Patterns and join the community searching for truth in the shadows. August 30th, 2013. 19-year-old Bryce Laspisa was driving from Sierra College to his home in Orange County, California. He had just started his sophomore year, studying graphic and industrial design. But just days into the semester, Bryce began acting strangely, texting his girlfriend alarming messages and giving away personal belongings to friends. Something was clearly off. On the evening of August 28th, Bryce told his girlfriend, Kim, that he needed to talk to her in person. He drove over to her apartment in Chico, where he reportedly behaved oddly. Kim, concerned, tried to take his keys to keep him from driving, but Bryce convinced her otherwise. Later, he began a long and disoriented journey south, toward his parents' home in Laguna Niguel. However, instead of arriving within the expected 8-hour drive, Bryce's behavior turned even more erratic. He called his parents several times throughout the night of August 29th and into the early hours of August 30th. They spoke with him around 2 a.m. when he claimed he was pulling off to rest. Hours later, a roadside assistance technician named Christian offered help when Bryce's car broke down due to an empty gas tank in Buttonwillow, California. Christian helped Bryce fill the tank, and even contacted Bryce's mother to assure her he was safe and calm. Oddly, Bryce didn't continue his journey home. For over 9 hours, his car sat idle in Buttonwillow. His parents called repeatedly, asking where he was, and each time he assured them he was fine and continuing his drive. At 2 p.m. he finally left Buttonwillow. By 3:30 a.m. on August 30th, surveillance footage captured his 2003 Toyota Highlander driving near Castaic Lake, just an hour from his home. But instead of heading directly to his parents' house, Bryce turned onto Lake Hughes Road and vanished. A few hours later, highway patrol officers discovered Bryce's vehicle overturned at the bottom of a 25-foot embankment. The rear window had been smashed from the inside. Bryce's phone, wallet, and laptop were all inside, but he was not. Search dogs tracked his scent briefly before it disappeared near a trail that leads into the surrounding wilderness. There was no blood, no clear sign of injury. Despite massive search efforts, including helicopters, dive teams, and volunteers, Bryce Laspisa has never been found. Some believe Bryce intentionally vanished, starting a new life. But his family insists he was not equipped mentally or emotionally to survive alone. Others think he may have experienced a psychotic break or adverse effects from prescription medication, leading to disoriented behavior and accidental death. Foul play remains a possibility, but no evidence of another person has ever been found. Why it's terrifying: Bryce made several calls in the 48 hours before his disappearance. He interacted with helpful strangers. He promised his mother he was coming home. Then gone. With no solid evidence of where he went or what happened, his case is a haunting puzzle that continues to torment his family and amateur sleuths alike. Backhand index pointing right. If you're drawn into these eerie mysteries, hit subscribe to Dark Patterns so you never miss a story. Jason Landry was 21 years old, a bright and thoughtful student at Texas State University, studying music and deeply passionate about playing the guitar. On the evening of December 13, 2020, he was on his way home to Missouri City, Texas for the holidays. He never made it. That night, Jason left campus around 10:55 p.m. It was a 3-hour drive to his family's home, one he'd done before. The roads were quiet and the skies were clear. But somewhere near Luling, Texas, just about 30 minutes into the drive, something happened. Something no one can fully explain. Jason's digital footprint tells us he was active on Snapchat up until just before 11:30 p.m. He even opened a message at 11:31. At 11:24 p.m., his phone connected with a cell tower along Salt Flat Road, a rural stretch of highway with very little traffic and even fewer lights. It's an odd route for someone driving home, especially when more direct highways were available. Some speculate Jason may have been distracted, tired, or perhaps following GPS. What's known is that shortly after Jason's vehicle, a Nissan Altima, crashed. It appeared to have gone off the road, struck a couple of small trees and a fence, and came to a stop near the intersection of Salt Flat Road and Sand Hill Road. That's where his car was later found. But the details surrounding the scene have puzzled investigators and haunted his family ever since. Inside the car were Jason's wallet, phone, and keys. Outside the car, about 900 feet away, police found pieces of Jason's clothing, including his shirt, shorts, socks, even his slide sandals, strewn along the road. It was as if he had undressed while walking, which some experts suggest can be a sign of hypothermia or drug-induced confusion. But it was Texas in December. The temperature was cool, not freezing. Certainly not cold enough for hypothermia to kick in that fast. Jason's backpack was also recovered nearby. Inside it was his laptop and personal belongings, untouched. His scent was picked up by cadaver dogs at the crash site and followed down a gravel road. But then, it vanished. No more scent. No more trace. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No drag marks. Nothing to indicate he'd been injured. The terrain around the area is rugged, filled with brush, thorns, barbed wire fences, and uneven footing. Yet there was no evidence of Jason falling, crawling, or hiding. He had simply walked, barefoot, half-naked, into the darkness. And then he was gone. Authorities launched a massive search effort. Helicopters scanned the area from above. Drones equipped with thermal cameras swept the terrain. Ground search teams combed over 30 square miles in the days that followed. Volunteers showed up by the hundreds. Local Texans, students, family, friends, desperate to help bring Jason home. His father, Kent Landry, a former police officer, became the face of the search. He spoke openly, emotionally, and often with raw honesty about the pain of not knowing. "There's no closure," he said. "Not until we bring my boy home." As time passed, theories began to surface. Some believed Jason had a bad reaction to drugs, possibly LSD or marijuana, and wandered off in a state of confusion. Others argued he may have been the victim of foul play, perhaps picked up by someone after the crash. A third group believes he may have succumbed to the elements or accidentally fallen into a body of water or well. But none of these theories can fully explain why Jason's clothing was removed or why his scent trail abruptly disappeared. No remains. No phone activity. No financial transactions. Just silence. Adding to the mystery, Jason had tried to call a friend around 11:25 p.m., just minutes before the crash. The call didn't go through. That was his last attempt at contact. One phone call. One message. Then, nothing. A year later, in December 2021, a private investigation team called Texaser conducted another search with cadaver dogs, and again, the dogs indicated a strong scent along a nearby fence line. But no body, bones, or remains were found. Just faint traces, hints. Enough to suggest he had been there, but not enough to say where he went. To this day, the question of what happened to Jason Landry remains unsolved. The road he drove on is the same. The car sits in evidence. The backpack is still packed. But Jason is missing. No suspects. No firm evidence. Just one call, and a cold night in Texas. What makes this case so chilling is its utter stillness. No body. No killer. No confirmed accident. Just a young man who seemed to vanish from the earth within minutes of that final call. You can't help but wonder, did someone pick him up? Did he walk into the woods? Or was he taken? And if he was out there, barefoot and alone, why didn't anyone see him? Why didn't he call again? His parents still search. They post updates. They hold vigils. And they refuse to give up hope. Because when someone disappears after just one phone call, hope becomes the last connection that remains. Mitrice Richardson was 24 years old, bright, beautiful, and full of promise. A graduate of California State University, Fullerton, she held a degree in psychology and had dreams of going to grad school. She worked part-time at a front desk, lived with her great-grandmother, and was adored by friends and family for her intelligence and smile. But what happened to Mitrice one September night in 2009 remains one of the most confusing and heartbreaking missing person cases in California's history. It began on September 16, 2009. Mitrice drove from her home in South Los Angeles to Malibu, an upscale coastal city known for its scenic cliffs and celebrity residents. There, she stopped at Jeffrey's, a high-end restaurant perched over the Pacific Ocean. But something was off. Waitstaff and patrons described Mitrice's behavior as bizarre. She rambled about space, philosophy, and the Bible. She claimed she was there to meet a girl named Davy Jones, made odd statements about astrology, and at one point walked out without paying for her $89 dinner. When confronted, she reportedly smiled and said, "It's spiritual." Staff were concerned, not just because she didn't pay, but because she seemed mentally unwell. The restaurant called the sheriff's department. Deputies from the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station arrived around 9 p.m. and arrested her for defrauding an innkeeper. They searched her car and found marijuana and a bottle of vodka, nothing that warranted additional charges. But here's where the story takes a dark and twisted turn. Mitrice was booked at the station. Her mother, Latice Sutton, called shortly after to ask if her daughter would be held overnight. She was concerned, and rightfully so. She knew Mitrice had been acting strangely. The station assured her that Mitrice was fine and that she could come pick her up in the morning. But that never happened. At around 12:28 a.m. on September 17th, just after midnight, Mitrice Richardson was released from the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station. She was alone. She had no car. It had been impounded back in Malibu. She had no wallet, no phone, and no money. She was 40 miles from home in an unfamiliar area with no transportation. She was released into the dark. She had made one phone call from jail earlier in the evening, to her grandmother. It was brief and unsettling. Mitrice said, "They're going to release me tonight." Her grandmother asked if she was okay. Mitrice said she was. But her tone lacked certainty. That call was the last time anyone in her family heard from her. In the early morning hours after her release, a man living in the rural Montenito area, just a few miles from the station, called the police. He said a skinny black woman with afro hair was sitting in his backyard. She seemed dazed. By the time police arrived, she was gone. That was the last confirmed sighting of Mitrice Richardson. For nearly a year, her family searched desperately. They handed out flyers, organized search parties, pleaded with the media. Her mother and father both accused the sheriff's department of negligence. Why had they released her alone in the middle of the night, clearly showing signs of a mental health crisis? The department maintained that Mitrice had seemed calm and lucid, not showing signs of distress. But many questioned their judgment. If she had been in distress earlier that evening, why wasn't she given a psychiatric evaluation? Why wasn't her mother called when they decided to release her? Then, on August 9, 2010, nearly 11 months after her disappearance, Mitrice's remains were discovered in a remote canyon 8 miles from the Lost Hills station. A park ranger found her partially decomposed body in an isolated area of Malibu Canyon, near a creek bed, in terrain so rugged it was barely accessible on foot. Her remains were scattered. Her clothing was found nearby. Her body was partially mummified due to the dry conditions. No cause of death was ever determined. The autopsy was inconclusive. The discovery of her body only deepened the mystery. How did she get there? Why was she naked? Did someone follow her? Did she fall? Was it suicide? Was it murder? The sheriff's department insisted there was no sign of foul play. But forensic experts questioned how her body could have ended up in such a hard-to-reach location without serious injury. Others pointed to the possibility of wild animals disturbing the scene. But nothing explained the decision to release a vulnerable young woman in such a precarious state. In a chilling twist, the coroner's office later claimed that the sheriff's department had moved Mitrice's remains before the coroner could arrive, violating protocol and potentially contaminating the scene. The department said it was necessary due to the terrain. But that act raised further suspicions of a possible cover-up. Her parents never accepted the official explanation. They believed the department failed their daughter, first by releasing her and then by failing to properly investigate her disappearance and death. They sued the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and eventually reached a settlement. But no amount of money could replace the truth they were never given. Mitrice's case sparked public outrage. It highlighted the dangers faced by those with mental illness, especially black women. It raised questions about how law enforcement handles vulnerable individuals. And it left behind a legacy of grief, unanswered questions, and systemic failure. One phone call. That's all her family got. One call from a jail cell, filled with cryptic statements and quiet fear. After that, silence. To this day, her case remains open but inactive. No suspects. No cause of death. Just the empty space left behind when someone vanishes and justice never comes. And the most haunting part? She didn't disappear in the middle of nowhere. She was released by the very people who were supposed to protect her. That's what makes the case of Mitrice Richardson not just tragic, but terrifying. On the night of September 13, 2013, 26-year-old Tiffany Whitton entered a Walmart in Marietta, Georgia, a typical Friday night in suburban America. But this would be the last place she was ever seen. In less than 10 minutes, Tiffany went from browsing store aisles to vanishing into the night, leaving behind a trail of rumors, fear, and a haunting silence that has never been broken. Tiffany was with her boyfriend Ashley Red Cottle that night. The two had been together on and off, and by most accounts, their relationship was volatile. Both had a history of drug use, petty crime, and run-ins with the law. Tiffany was a young mother, estranged from her family and struggling with addiction. But she was trying to get her life together. Or so it seemed. At around 2 a.m., surveillance cameras at Walmart captured Tiffany and Cottle entering the store. What happened inside plays out like the opening scene of a thriller. Tiffany was visibly agitated, darting down aisles, acting paranoid, stuffing small items into her bag. Loss prevention officers at the store quickly took notice. They approached Cottle first. Tiffany, seeing the confrontation, bolted. She ran straight out of the store, barefoot. She had kicked off her flip-flops while sprinting, leaving them behind. The last confirmed image of her was her silhouette disappearing into the darkness of the parking lot. Loss prevention didn't pursue her. She hadn't technically stolen anything yet. Cottle, meanwhile, was briefly detained and then released. He told police that Tiffany had taken off and that he didn't know where she went. That was it. Number 911 call. No missing person report from Cottle. No follow-up. Tiffany vanished into thin air, and for weeks, nobody looked for her. It wasn't until almost 6 weeks later, in October 2013, that Tiffany's mother, Lisa Daniels, reported her missing. When she hadn't heard from her daughter in over a month, she knew something was wrong. Tiffany had gone silent. No texts, no Facebook activity, no contact with her daughter. That had never happened before. By then, the trail had gone cold. Police began their investigation late and reluctantly. Tiffany's past made it easy for some to dismiss her disappearance. A drug user, a petty thief, a troubled young woman. But her mother insisted Tiffany wouldn't just walk away. Not from her child. Not without a word. As detectives looked deeper, they found little to go on. No one had seen Tiffany since that night at Walmart. No bank activity. No phone records. No social media use. Nothing. She had simply vanished. Suspicion quickly turned toward Ashley Cottle. He had a lengthy criminal record, including drug offenses and domestic violence. Interviews with friends and acquaintances revealed a disturbing picture. Tiffany and Cottle had reportedly fought earlier that day. Some claimed he was controlling. Others said he had been violent in the past. But with no body, no witness, and no confession, the case stalled. Cottle's story never changed. She ran and he never saw her again. He passed at least one polygraph test. Yet his behavior raised eyebrows. He never tried to report her missing. He never helped with searches. When confronted by journalists years later, he remained evasive and dismissive. Tiffany's family, especially her mother, refused to give up. Lisa Daniels became a voice for her daughter, holding vigils, speaking to the media, pushing the police to keep the case active. She wanted people to understand that Tiffany was more than her mistakes. She was a daughter, a mother, a human being. But as the years passed, hope faded. In 2017, 4 years after Tiffany disappeared, investigators declared her case a probable homicide. Cottle was named a person of interest but not a suspect. There wasn't enough evidence to charge him or anyone else. The case remains technically open, but with no leads, no arrests, and no resolution. There are theories, many of them. Some believe Tiffany died that night, perhaps at the hands of someone she knew. That she was chased or hunted down after fleeing Walmart. That Cottle followed her out and something violent happened in the shadows. Others speculate she may have overdosed somewhere, her body hidden or buried by someone afraid of being caught. A few cling to the idea that Tiffany might still be alive, that she ran from a chaotic life, started over somewhere new. But that theory grows less believable each year. She left behind everything, her clothes, her shoes, her ID, her child. People who flee usually plan. Tiffany ran barefoot into the night, and made one call. Shortly after she ran from the store, Cottle tried calling her phone multiple times. One call connected, briefly. It was silent. Then the line dropped. That was the last known contact from Tiffany Whitton. One call. No voice. No goodbye. Just static and darkness. What makes this case so haunting isn't just that she vanished. It's that she vanished in public, under bright lights, surrounded by cameras and witnesses, and still no one knows what happened. Tiffany's case forces us to confront something uncomfortable: how society treats people we see as broken. Would the investigation have been more urgent if Tiffany had come from a wealthy background? If she had no criminal record? If she had been the girl next door instead of someone on the fringe? Because for 6 weeks no one searched. No one asked questions. No one even noticed she was missing. And that silence, that delay, might have cost her life. Tiffany Whitton remains missing to this day. No body. No answers. No justice. Only a barefoot girl running into the night, and a mother still waiting to hear her voice again. In the early hours of August 9, 2013, 26-year-old Brandon Lawson disappeared on a dark, desolate stretch of highway in West Texas. What makes this case stand apart from many others is not just the suddenness of his disappearance, but the chilling 911 call he made before vanishing. It's a case full of mystery, fear, and unanswered questions, with a recorded cry for help echoing into silence. Brandon was a father of 4. He lived with his longtime girlfriend Bryce Laspisa in San Angelo, Texas. He had a steady job in the oil fields, though recently he'd been under pressure, tired, stressed, and reportedly dealing with personal issues. On the night of August 8th, Brandon and Bryce had an argument. According to her, Brandon was upset and left the house abruptly at around 11:54 p.m., saying he was going to his father's home in Crowley, 3 hours away. He took his truck but not much else. What we do know is that Brandon had a prior felony warrant and, despite getting his life back on track, may have been afraid of being arrested. That night, his actions became increasingly erratic and terrifying. At 12:38 a.m., Brandon called his brother Kyle and said he had run out of gas on U.S. Route 277 near Bronte, Texas. He asked Kyle to bring a gas can. Kyle and his girlfriend agreed to help and set out toward his location. But as they approached, Brandon's behavior became increasingly strange. He called Kyle again and said he was being chased. "3 guys are after me," he reportedly said. Kyle was confused. Was Brandon hallucinating? On something? Or was he really being pursued? Then came the most chilling part of the case. At 12:50 a.m., Brandon called 911. The call lasted 43 seconds and was made from the side of the road near the 38th mile marker of Route 277. His voice is panicked, disjointed, and haunting. Here's a transcript of the most commonly accepted interpretation. "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. The guy's chasing to the woods. Please hurry." The dispatcher tries to get more information, but Brandon's voice is garbled and scared. He says, "We're not talking to him," and at one point possibly says, "I need the cops." Then the call ends. No location ping. No return call. In the following minutes, Brandon made several calls, to his brother, to 911 again. Those calls didn't go through, and to Bryce. None of them were answered. He left a voicemail for Bryce that simply said, "I got the cops chasing me." At around 1:10 a.m., Kyle arrived at the scene. He found Brandon's truck parked awkwardly off the side of the road with no sign of Brandon. A sheriff's deputy arrived around the same time. Kyle, unsure if Brandon had a warrant out, didn't mention the 911 call or Brandon's paranoia. He assumed Brandon was hiding nearby and would return once the officer left. Kyle left the gas can in the bed of the truck and waited nearby, hoping Brandon would come out. But he never did. From that point on, Brandon Lawson was gone. Search efforts began in the following days. Helicopters flew over the area. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Foot patrols combed the rugged brushland. But no trace of Brandon was found. The terrain was unforgiving, dense bushes, mesquite trees, rattlesnakes. It was the kind of land where someone could easily disappear, or worse. There were theories, of course. Some believed Brandon was hallucinating or under the influence of drugs. Kyle later admitted Brandon had taken methamphetamines the night of his disappearance. That might explain his paranoia and erratic speech. But would it explain a total vanishing? Others believed Brandon was genuinely in danger, that he may have stumbled upon something criminal in progress, and that his cryptic call was a desperate cry for help. The mention of being chased into the woods has never been explained. A third theory suggested he might have succumbed to the elements, but that would imply his body was somewhere nearby, yet searches turned up nothing. Then in 2022, nearly 9 years after he disappeared, authorities announced they had found human remains near the area where Brandon went missing. DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Brandon Lawson. But even with this grim discovery, there were no answers about what happened that night. The location of the remains was within walking distance of where he made his 911 call. The fact that it took nearly a decade to find him has raised more questions than answers. Why wasn't he found sooner? Was he hidden? Or did something else happen that caused the body to be missed in earlier searches? Brandon's family now has a form of closure. But the case remains filled with gaps. Why did he say someone was chasing him? Why did his voice sound so afraid? What was he running from? The 911 call still circulates online. People analyze every syllable, trying to decode what Brandon said, hoping to find clues. It's unsettling. It sounds like someone genuinely terrified in real-time danger. And then, just like that, nothing. No more calls. No more sightings. Just a truck on the side of the road, a gas can, and a haunting message that still gives people chills. Brandon Lawson didn't vanish into the ether. He died that night. But the why, the how, that part may remain lost forever. He made one phone call, and then he was gone. They were sons, daughters, sisters, brothers. Real people, real lives, real fear. Each of them made just one phone call, a final cry for help, a moment of panic, a trace of confusion, then silence. No follow-up, no second chances. They vanished into the dark, leaving behind devastated families, cold case files, and millions of unanswered questions. And while you're watching this from the safety of your home, there are mothers who still sleep by the phone, hoping it rings. There are brothers who still walk the roads where they last saw them. There are children growing up not knowing where their parent went. These stories don't make it to the headlines. They fade, unless someone keeps them alive. That someone is you. If you've watched this far and haven't subscribed, ask yourself, would you care more if it was someone you loved? If it was your sister, your son, your friend who vanished after one call, wouldn't you want the world to remember them? Every time you don't subscribe, one more story risks being forgotten. But if you do, you're helping us shine a light on the cases that others have left in the dark. Subscribe to Dark Patterns, because silence helps no one, and ignorance is complicity.